Since getting married, the woman has been busy every morning. Her husband is still complaining in the bedroom. Why didn't she prepare the clothes she was going to wear today the night before? On one side, her daughter is demanding to wear a flowery dress to school. On the other side, her husband is scolding her for not adding a sausage to breakfast. The frustrated wife takes out her anger on her daughter. Seeing that a fight is about to break out at home, the husband quickly puts down the milk and prepares to escape the house. In reality, the one who is even more exhausted is Haisu's mother. To help her daughter, the mother rides an electric bike for 2 hours every morning to rush to her daughter's house. To save time, she runs through one red light after another. Even the police at the intersection can't stop her. When the mother finally arrives, panting and out of breath, her daughter complains about her being so late. She then hands the child to her mother and rushes off to work. Before leaving, she even reminded her mother to wash the clothes in the bathroom. Haisu rushed to the company at full speed, but she was still a step too late. Because she was often late, she was always punished by her boss with overtime. Meanwhile, Sunja sent the children to the school bus and then went back to help her daughter clean the room. After finally finishing her chores, she had to return to the store to work. Jae-hyuk feels sorry for his sister, who is bossed around by Haisu every day, but Sunja says that she should help them while she is still healthy. That way, they can save money to buy a house as soon as possible. But even though Sunja works so hard every day without complaint, Haisu's mother-in-law treats her like a free babysitter. She lives in the apartment next door, but she never helps take care of the children. Whenever she has time, she tries to learn how to play golf like the rich ladies. On this day, she happens to run into Sunja. She takes the opportunity to tell Sunja that the side dish she brought is too salty and that she should make it less salty next time. Eating food that is too salty is very bad for your health. Before leaving, she shamelessly complains to Sunja that Haisu hasn't brought the children back for a long time. It's unreasonable that she doesn't come back even though she lives so close. Fortunately, she has a father-in-law with the right values. Tae-jin, seeing her endlessly nagging, felt so ashamed he wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. He couldn't understand how his wife could say such things. Lucy is clearly your granddaughter, yet you ask Sunja how the child has been lately? Living so close and not helping to take care of the children is already very inconsiderate. What's even worse is criticizing the kimchi someone else pickled for being too salty. If it's too salty, don't go to your daughter-in-law's house to sneak a taste. Suki not only refuses to reflect on herself but always finds excuses for her behavior. She even brags to her sisters that her actions are the wisest choice. Since the daughter-in-law gave birth to the child, she should take care of it herself. If the mother-in-law feels sorry, she will naturally come to help. Does she really plan to die taking care of her grandson at her age? Hearing these words, the sisters all mocked Suki for being heartless. What a woman would be unlucky to have a mother-in-law like that. Haisu was busy at work when she suddenly received a call from her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law was inviting her sisters over for dinner tonight, so she wanted her daughter-in-law to go home and cook for them. But Haisu had to work overtime that night, and she was too weak-willed to refuse. She had no choice but to ask her mother to help her. Her husband was too busy at work, so she had to ask her mother to pick up the children. Although Sunja was very angry with her good-for-nothing daughter, she still comforted her, telling her to focus on her work and leave the cooking to her. That evening, Sunja picked up the children and headed to her daughter's house to cook. To her surprise, her troublesome son-in-law was at home, behaving recklessly. Miho was startled by his mother-in-law's sudden arrival and didn't know how to explain himself. He could only awkwardly hide in the bedroom. His mother-in-law always showed up suddenly, which made him feel very uncomfortable. In order to escape from this house, Miho lied and said that something had come up at work. He had no choice but to hide at his mother's house next door, but he didn't know that his wife was cooking for his mother-in-law. Miho was startled when he saw his wife. Just then, his father-in-law and mother-in-law also rushed back. Suki wondered why her husband and son had suddenly returned and locked the two of them in the study. It turned out that Suki had lied, saying her husband was at the company as a consultant. Her son was on a business trip to Iceland, so she had instructed them not to go out under any circumstances. Tae-jin finally understood why his daughter-in-law had come to cook. Meanwhile, Sunja had already brought the prepared dishes over. She had just left the house when she ran into Suki's sisters. The group didn't really want to come over for dinner, but Suki told them that there was a nanny at home. Hearing with her own ears that she had become someone else's nanny, Sunja felt extremely humiliated. On top of that, her own daughter was busy fussing over her mother-in-law, Suki's sisters asked her if the delicious kimchi was made by the nanny. She shyly explained that her in-laws had brought them, but no one believed that her in-laws would bring kimchi themselves. Unexpectedly, Suki thought that if her son was good enough to marry into their family, what was so difficult about making a little kimchi? Her mother-in-law looked down on her and her mother Haisu, which made her feel very uncomfortable. This also made Taejin very unhappy. He was angry at his wife for being so careless. How could you let your in-laws come over to cook just to make yourself happy? Your daughter-in-law is busy all day with work and family. How could you ask them to trouble them? After being scolded by her husband, Suki came to take her anger out on her daughter-in-law. She blamed her daughter-in-law for asking her mother to come over to help with such a small thing, causing her to be humiliated by her husband. Seeing her mother-in-law angry, Haeseo could only keep saying sorry. This scene was witnessed by her father-in-law. Seeing Suki's expression, Taejin knew that she was up to no good. Just then, the family suddenly heard the sound of a child crying. They saw Sunja running back with the child on her back. Seeing that the child had hit his head, Suki blamed her for not taking care of the child. She said that this would leave a scar and what would they do in the future? Seeing the child's condition, Sunja felt very guilty. Haeseo scolded her mother harshly. This made Sunja feel both sorry for her granddaughter and very wronged. The next day, she was late in going to her daughter's house. Haeseo could only stand at the door with her child, waiting for the bus. This scene was also seen by her father-in-law. He told her to hurry to work and leave the child with him. This was the first time the in-laws had ever helped take care of the child, but she never imagined that her mother was hiding nearby, watching them. When Taejin brought his granddaughter back, his wife's first question was why he hadn't sent the child to kindergarten. Suki then called her husband into the bedroom and told him to take the child to his mother's house immediately. No matter the reason, she absolutely refused to help take care of the child. Not even for a day. Taejin angrily scolded his wife for being so unreasonable. Suki said she absolutely couldn't take care of Lucy. Hayami, upon learning that her mother had been wronged by her older sister because of the child's injury, was furious. She confronted her sister, asking how she could treat their mother like that. Our mother raised the three of us with so much hardship, she said. Now she's helping you take care of the child and the household without complaint. Do you all think of her as a maid? Hayami demanded that Haeseo go apologize to her mother immediately. In truth, Haeseo had already regretted her actions because of this incident. She knew how difficult her mother had been over the years. Asking her to help take care of the children had also been emotionally taxing for her. However, the frustrations from her job and the mundane household chores had pushed Haeseo to the brink of collapse. She was also constantly nagged by her mother for not cleaning the room. Sunja, though she's never worked a day in her life, knows how hard her daughter works, but she still angrily declared she wouldn't help with the kids anymore. Haeseo, furious, turned to leave. Just then, Hayami returned home. Seeing her sister and mother like this, Hayami told her to hire a nanny and stop making her mother do chores. Hearing this, her mother flew into a rage and kicked both sisters out. Soki, seeing her daughter-in-law not returning home so late, told her son to call and check on her, but her husband hurriedly stopped her, saying, "You know she's working overtime. Why keep calling?" Soki, worried about the child sleeping there alone at night, hurried her son to eat quickly and take the child home. The next day, Miho, upon learning that his mother-in-law wouldn't come to help with the child, began complaining non-stop. "You know the situation at home and yet you won't come to help?" Haeseo, seeing her in-law's attitude, decided to quit her job and take care of the children herself. To her surprise, her husband panicked immediately. "The house from my father's family still has a mortgage, and the car is still being paid off in installments. If you quit your job, our family will become completely destitute." But Haeseo had been working hard for this family ever since she married into it. This time, no matter what, she was determined to give up and live a normal life. Suki was afraid her daughter-in-law would ask her to help take care of the children, so she packed her things early in the morning and prepared to leave. Her husband was so angry he grabbed her and dragged her back, but no matter what he did, he couldn't stop this wicked woman. It turned out that Lucy had been raised by her grandmother since she was born. Suki never helped her son and daughter-in-law, no matter how tired they were. Even when it came to cooking a meal for her granddaughter, she would constantly complain. Suki always believed that she should enjoy her life and not die serving her grandchildren. Fortunately, her father-in-law was a reasonable man who loved his granddaughter dearly. Not only did he play with her and do her hair, He even gave her free manicures. Suki was so angry when she saw her husband's red fingernails that she almost collapsed. She was afraid that her son would leave the child with her to take care of, so she hurriedly called her daughter-in-law. She makes it clear that she absolutely cannot help them take care of their child. But Haisu wanted Miho to take Lucy to the school bus. Who knew he would leave his daughter with his mother-in-law? Besides, she never asked her mother-in-law to help take care of the child. Haisu was fed up with her mother-in-law's meddling. Seeing that her daughter-in-law is ignoring her, she calls her son again. Miho couldn't understand why his mother, who had raised the child for 6 years without complaint, couldn't help take care of the child for just one day. That evening, as soon as Miho got home from work, his mother hurriedly brought the child back. What was even more infuriating was that she hadn't even cooked a meal for her granddaughter. Miho could only helplessly cook instant noodles for the child. But this wasn't a sustainable solution. The next day, he went to the mall and bought his mother-in-law the best dress on installment. Knowing that the child was her mother-in-law's weakness, he had also taught his daughter what to say to apologize to her. Sunja heard her granddaughter's innocent voice and tears streamed down her face. Seeing the injury on the child's head, she felt unbearable pain in her heart. She also knew exactly what her son-in-law meant. She said she wouldn't interfere in their affairs anymore. But that night, she took the first bus at midnight and went to her daughter's house. When the daughter saw her mother, she could no longer control her emotions. She tightly hugged her mother, repeatedly saying sorry. Suki was afraid her son would make her take care of the child, so she hurriedly left. Unbeknownst to her, she bumped into Sunja as soon as she stepped out. Sunja chased after her frantically. She had thought Suki was coming to apologize for what happened a few days ago, but as soon as she opened her mouth, she was met with a barrage of complaints. Anyway, she was going to come back eventually, so why bother with this nonsense? Now she had to take care of Lucy for 3 days, leaving her exhausted and in pain. Sunja, seeing Suki speak like this, finally lost her temper. Lucy isn't your granddaughter? I'm the grandmother, and you're the biological grandmother. Suki was speechless, but she stubbornly refused to argue with someone she considered uneducated. If you think you're ignorant and uneducated, then Sunja should really hand the child over to this educated grandmother to take care of. Also, the clothes are already washed in the washing machine. When hanging them up, make sure there are no wrinkles. You must shake them out properly. A wealthy young master disguised as an intern came to work at his family's company. He never expected that on his first day of the interview, he would bump into a female executive. But he never imagined that this woman was the company's infamous female tyrant. Fortunately, the woman didn't lose her temper today and urgently called him to the stairwell. But Taemin was so shocked by the scene that he froze in place. Just as he was about to run away, Hayami told him to take off his clothes. Having never been in such a situation before, he was completely at a loss. Before he could ask why, he turned around and saw that Hayami had already taken off her clothes. She stood there with her hands on her hips, telling him to hurry up. With no choice, Taemin blushed and obediently followed her instructions. But before he could finish, Hayami snatched the clothes and put them on herself. She then pulled out a business card from her pocket and told him to come pick up his clothes tomorrow, and to just throw hers away. It turned out that Hayami had an important meeting with a client today, but today was also an important day for Taemin. Fortunately, no one at the company recognized him. Taemin grabbed the collar of his shirt and quietly entered the new employee interview room. To avoid embarrassment, he pretended to have a cold. The next day, Taemin was successfully assigned to the company's core department with the top score, but he never imagined that his immediate superior would be Hayami, who had stolen his clothes. Although both of them felt a little awkward, Hayami pretended not to recognize him. She assigned him to Secretary Yoon, who loved gossiping the most in the department. Secretary Yoon then called Taemin aside and warned him not to give Hayami any ammunition. Otherwise, that devil would make his life miserable. That evening, everyone celebrated the new hires with a group dinner. Secretary Yoon kept trying to curry favor with Hayami, but as soon as Taemin opened his mouth, he voiced his opinions about the department. Little did he know that his words had offended the leader. The entire atmosphere instantly turned awkward. Hayami didn't care about saving face and angrily turned and left. Taemin saw this and hurried out to stop Hayami and explained that he didn't mean it. But being rebuked by a newcomer in front of everyone made Hayami very upset. Hayami said, "Don't get too cocky. Just take your shirt back." Secretary Yoon mistakenly thought Taemin was Hayami's boyfriend. No matter how Taemin explained, Secretary Yoon refused to believe him. Soon, Rumors about their secret relationship began to spread like wildfire. Taemin hoped Hayami would explain the shirt incident to everyone. Hayami finally realized that her words from last night had caused trouble for herself. Seeing her subordinates gossiping behind her back, Hayami felt so embarrassed she wanted to find a hole to crawl into, but she couldn't possibly step forward to explain such a trivial matter. That evening, Hayami called Taemin and told him to take his shirt back immediately. When Taemin arrived, Hayami angrily returned the shirt to him. Just as he was about to leave, Taemin stopped Hayami. It turned out that Taemin had already washed the shirt Hayami had stained that day. His intuition told him he would meet the owner of the shirt again. Therefore, Taemin did not throw the shirt away as Hayami had instructed. His thoughtfulness made Hayami change her impression of him a little. Hayami scolded him for making her look bad in front of everyone. The next day, Hayami wanted to find a suitable excuse to get rid of Taemin, but after looking at Taemin's resume, it was perfect. She asked around and found out that he was a hot commodity that many companies were fighting over, and his work ability was also outstanding, but for some reason, he refused to stay. However, just as she was leaving, Hayami bumped into Secretary Yoon, who asked Taemin to help with a proposal. Secretary Yoon was immediately terrified, but this time, Hayami didn't make things difficult for him. Instead, she took the opportunity to hand the proposal to an inexperienced newcomer. Sure enough, when Taemin handed the completed proposal to Hayami, she used this opportunity to try to crush the newcomer. She demanded he stay up all night to rewrite it due to lack of experience. In reality, Taemin's proposal wasn't as bad as Hayami claimed, but she didn't expect Taemin to apologize sincerely instead of arguing. Taemin promised to submit the revised proposal by tomorrow morning. After work, Hayami noticed Taemin following her closely. This immediately gave her an uneasy feeling. As Taemin was about to follow her to her building, Hayami couldn't help but stop and ask him what he was doing. Taemin said that he had also moved to the neighborhood. Even more astonishingly, they lived in the same building. The female manager came to the company to inspect the work. As soon as she entered, she saw her son being treated like a donkey by everyone. The manager's sudden visit startled everyone. His co-workers signaled to Taemin to quickly put down the bucket and stand up straight. The team leader even took the initiative to introduce the new employee to the boss, but they had no idea that Taemin was the president's son. He had concealed his identity and come to work at the bottom of the company, so that he could learn from Hayami, the most capable employee, and then inherit the company and become their new president. But he didn't expect that working at the bottom wouldn't be easy, because he offended the boss. Hayami made things difficult for Taemin in various ways. One day, Taemin discovered that his work ID was missing. He pleaded with Hayami to help him get back inside, but Hayami mocked him, asking if he had left his work ID at some girl's place. The next day, while Hayami was cleaning her room, she suddenly pulled out a rope from under the bed. Upon closer inspection, she realized it was Taemin's work ID. She couldn't understand how Taemin's ID card ended up in her house. She rushed over to ask what was going on, but Taemin gave her an evil smile and suggested they have dinner together and he would explain everything later. It turned out that a few days earlier, Taemin had encountered Hayami in the elevator, completely drunk. Seeing that she couldn't even stand up straight, Taemin had no choice but to carry her home. Unexpectedly, the seemingly frail Hayami had exhausted Taemin to the point of sweating profusely. It was at that moment that Taemin dropped his work ID at Hayami's house. Little did he know that the next day, Hayami wouldn't remember a thing. Upon learning the full story, Hayami was so embarrassed she wanted to find a crack in the ground to crawl into. Nevertheless, Hayami still wanted to thank Taemin for taking her home. Taemin apologized to her, saying it was his mistake for trying to show off. However, Taemin wasn't trying to argue with her on purpose. Looking at the silly young man in front of her, Hayami's anger dissipated. Thus, the tension between the two finally eased. Taemin felt deeply sympathetic toward Hayami's true reason for working so hard, because last night, he had accidentally seen Hayami carrying a child home. This made Taemin mistakenly think that Hayami was a single mother. Hayami wiped away the coffee that had spilled out and angrily asked him if she looked like a woman with a child. In-suk had once abandoned her young daughter to marry into a wealthy family, but she didn't know that Hayami was the child she had abandoned. Although she admired Hayami as the only female department head in the company, Hayami's sharpness made her feel uncomfortable and even afraid that she might threaten her position. So In-suk invited Hayami to a restaurant to try to win her over. Though she didn't recognize the woman in front of her, the daughter would never forget that face. It turned out that on the day In-suk was preparing to return to the company, Hayami recognized her on TV as her biological mother. Since then, Hayami often dreamed of being abandoned as a child. She hated her biological mother deeply but was grateful to her stepmother for raising her. It was her stepmother's upbringing that made her feel the warmth of a family. However, In-suk was Hayami's superior, and the mother and daughter couldn't avoid seeing each other often. When her superior invited her out, Hayami had no choice but to go. Hayami asked her directly what she wanted. In-suk said that since returning to the country, she had no one she could confide in. She felt that Hayami was similar to her in personality and wanted to be friends with her. To get closer to Hayami quickly, In-suk even allowed her to ask her any questions. Hayami forced herself to stay calm, put down her knife and fork, and asked In-suk about something she had avoided for 20 years. In-suk became tense and didn't know how to answer the question. To hide her anxiety, In-suk lied and said that her daughter had always lived in the United States. These words deeply hurt Hayami's heart. She couldn't believe that she had such a mother. Hayami sat alone in the bar drinking in silence, and this scene was witnessed by Taemin. She wondered how Taemin had ended up here. Taemin had already noticed that Hayami had been troubled lately, so he only let her drink a little before accompanying her home. After spending some time together, Hayami also changed her cold attitude toward Taemin and even took him out to work and study together. In the evening, the two of them went to the riverbank to clear their minds. Taemin thoughtfully placed the noodles he had prepared in front of her. He felt this was the best place to release stress. However, Hayami felt that to truly release stress, she needed a can of beer. So she turned around and went to the convenience store. But the two were so engrossed in conversation that Hayami didn't notice the bicycle behind her. Fortunately, Taemin managed to protect her just in time, preventing her from being hit by the bike. Though they narrowly escaped, she still accidentally injured her foot. After returning home, Taemin hurriedly found an ice pack to help reduce the swelling. This gesture deeply moved Hayami. In-suk returned home and began to pace restlessly. That day, she finally couldn't stand it anymore and went to her sister-in-law's house. When Sunja saw her heartless younger sister-in-law, she was startled. 20 years had passed, and In-suk's sudden appearance made Sunja furious. Back then, In-suk had given Sunja money to send her daughter to the United States. She just wanted to find out how her daughter was doing there. But Sunja wasn't as heartless as her. Sunja didn't want Hayami to know anything about In-suk. In a fit of anger, she told her that the child was doing very well in the United States. Because of what Hayami had said last time, In-suk felt very uneasy. After returning home, she was afraid that the matter of her daughter would be exposed, so she wanted to cut off all ties with them. Sunja never imagined that In-suk not only didn't repent but also said such cruel words. She then took a basin of salt and threw it at In-suk with all her strength. Suki actually mocked Sunja's ignorance and lack of culture to her face. Sunja couldn't take it anymore. This time, she finally couldn't hold back and exploded. She decided to give her grandson to her cultured mother-in-law and give her a bunch of housework to do. Her daughter-in-law also planned to take advantage of this opportunity to teach her hateful mother-in-law a lesson. Haisa then called her mother-in-law to thank her for helping her take care of the child in the future. The mother-in-law was stunned when she heard this, but her daughter-in-law didn't give her a chance to speak. She claimed that she would bring the child with her to thank her that night. Suki really regretted provoking Sunja for no reason. With no other choice, she had to call her son. Miho was so angry that his mother had offended his mother-in-law again that he almost cried. He had worked so hard to get his mother-in-law to come back. Couldn't his mother just be patient? That night, her son told her to go apologize to her mother-in-law, but Suki couldn't bring herself to lower her pride for that. However, the two of them couldn't think of any other solutions. So, the mother and son decided to ask their father for help. The next day, the two of them went to the flower shop. Suki even picked out a white chrysanthemum for Sunja. Her son asked her, "Are you trying to send your mother-in-law away?" In the end, after discussing it among the three of them, they chose a bouquet of red roses. But as soon as they arrived at Sunja's doorstep, a bucket of water was poured over the mother and son. Suki was so angry she had to change into Sunja's work clothes. She could also smell the stench of mop water on her body. Fearing his mother would cause trouble again, the son grabbed a bottle of insecticide and sprayed it on his mother to cover the smell. Having endured so much humiliation, Suki could no longer hold back her tears. The son, scared, hugged his mother tightly. Miho said he could live without his mother, but he couldn't live without his mother-in-law. Hearing this, Suki was nearly driven to her death by her unfilial son. But over the years, Miho had grown accustomed to his mother-in-law's care. Most importantly, he couldn't live without the dishes she cooked. So, For his sake, Miho begged his mother to endure it. Meanwhile, the two outside were chatting animatedly. Whenever they talked about the children, they had endless things to say. Later, Taejin brought out 100 roses for Sunja. He knew how hard she had worked over the years to take care of his son's family. He hadn't fulfilled his duties as a grandfather. He sincerely apologized to Sunja for his negligence. Sure enough, every woman would be as happy as a young girl when receiving flowers. But Suki was full of reluctance and scolded her husband for saying such insincere words. To her surprise, her husband told her he was speaking the truth. Sunja had always been as pure as a flower in her heart. Unlike you, who dresses up like a vase all day long, what's the use? Although she was still seething inside, Suki finally felt free again. The next morning, she dressed up and prepared to go out for golf, but as soon as she stepped out the door, she bumped into Sunja again. This time, she dared not bully Sunja. Not only did she speak politely, but she also wrapped her newly bought scarf around Sunja's neck. Then, with a smile on her face, she turned and left. Suki's sudden change left Sunja speechless. She wondered how long the two would maintain this relationship. Miho had just returned home and casually threw his bag on the bed, but was stopped by his mother-in-law. Then he habitually threw his tie on the lamp, only to be stopped again by his mother-in-law. As soon as he lay down on the bed, he threw his smelly socks at the door. His mother-in-law immediately scolded him. Miho was so scared that he quickly got up and picked up the socks from the floor. He began to suspect that his mother-in-law had installed a surveillance camera in the room. Although Sunja made her son-in-law feel very inconvenient, but thinking about the fragrant mackerel soup, he could endure anything. Miho obediently took a shower, got dressed, and went to help his mother-in-law take out the trash. That evening, his mother-in-law wasn't home when he got off work, so Miho finally had a day to relax. But to his surprise, he was immediately caught by his mother-in-law. Miho was so embarrassed that he immediately hid under the table. From then on, he dared not come out so carelessly. Every time he finished showering, he would obediently get dressed. But one day, not only did his mother-in-law not come, but his wife didn't come home after work either. It turned out that Sunja had fallen ill after the biological mother of her second daughter came. After raising Hayami for 28 years, she never expected the biological mother to suddenly show up. Sunja had noticed that Hayami had been acting strangely lately, both in her speech and emotions. She was very afraid that seeing her mother would hurt Hayami again. If anything happened to Hayami, she wouldn't be able to live either. Haisu was worried, so she went to her sister's house the next day to see if she knew about it. But just then, someone rang the doorbell. It turned out that Taemin was worried about Hayami's injury and had come to check on her. Haisel looked him up and down and found him very attractive. She hurriedly invited Taemin inside. Seeing how much Taemin cared about Hayami, she started asking him all sorts of questions. Hayami hinted at her sister to stop crying, but to her surprise, Taemin pulled out some ointment for bruises. Taemin's thoughtfulness even moved her sister. After Taemin left, Haisu was so excited she almost jumped for joy. She couldn't believe that her sister, who had been single her whole life, had finally caught on. But Hayami said he was just a new employee at the company who happened to be her neighbor. Seeing how well the two got along, Haiso urged her sister to seize the opportunity. Her sister's words made Hayami blush all the way to her neck. Before leaving, she reminded her sister to send some of the side dishes she had brought over. To thank Taemin, Hayami followed her sister's instructions and took the side dishes over. She also told him that he must never appear at her house again to avoid any misunderstandings. Just as Hayami was about to leave, Taemin called her back. He complimented her, saying she looked even purer and cuter without makeup. Taemin's words instantly made Hayami blush. Haisu told her mother about Hayami's situation and said she seemed in a good mood. Upon learning that Hayami had a boyfriend, her mother finally put her mind at ease. Every time Hayami suggested going out for a meal, everyone would unanimously make excuses to refuse. Later, her colleagues secretly went out drinking to relax and talk badly about Hayami. Only Taemin disliked their behavior. He knew that although Hayami appeared aloof on the surface, she also had a cute side. That day, the two of them went to an arcade to relax. Hayami was scared by the images on the game machine and flailed her arms around. Taemin, standing next to her, was amused and sweating profusely. He turned around and started complaining that the game was too childish. But then Hayami suggested that Taemin try to grab a stuffed animal for her. They then started playing darts, and Hayami couldn't help but act like a spoiled child. Just as they were having fun, the company suddenly called. Taemin suspected that Hyami had left in such a hurry to meet her boyfriend. He was about to go out to eat alone when he happened to run into Hyami returning. Seeing Taemin angry, Hyami quickly apologized to him, but after taking a few steps, Hyami almost twisted her injured foot. Taemin, feeling sorry for her, turned around and held her arm. The next day at work, Hyami got into an argument with In-suk over company matters. Taemin heard about it and came to Hyami's office to ask her about it, but Hyami told him not to think that just because they had eaten together a few times, they were close. No matter what happened in the meeting, it wasn't her place as a junior employee to interfere. She also told him not to flatter the boss or show unnecessary concern. Hyami's words hurt Taemin deeply. That night, after drinking, Taemin happened to run into Hyami, who had just finished working overtime. He boldly approached Hyami and asked her if she could change her temperament and stop being so fickle. Seeing how her colleagues treated her made him feel hurt. Taemin's words startled Hyami. However, she didn't take his words to heart and decided to deal with him the next day when he was sober. The next day, Hyami called Taemin into her office and gave him a stern lecture. However, Taemin realized that Hyami was just treating him like a subordinate, which severely hurt his pride. But Hyami didn't take it to heart. She was curious if Taemin had encountered any issues at work. From then on, Taemin didn't speak to Hyami except for work-related matters. That night, he was drinking alone at a bar when Hyami happened to pass by. Hyami wanted to know why Taemin was so upset. Taemin was very worried about why Hyami was fighting with her boss. Hyami explained that she couldn't control her temper at the time and didn't care about their seniority. Now that Taemin was with her, she realized how bad it felt. On the way back, Hyami almost fell again, but Taemin caught her in time. At that moment, cherry blossoms were flying everywhere, making the scene look very romantic. Hyami also felt a sudden flutter in her heart. With a worried look on his face, Taemin helped Hyami back home. Although they were separated by a door, it seemed like both of them could hear each other's heartbeats. Miho felt a surge of fear whenever he saw his mother-in-law. Seeing that his favorite soccer game was about to start, Miho could only sneak up cautiously. He saw his mother-in-law watching the TV drama with tears streaming down her face. The son-in-law could only run out and watch the game at the security guard's booth. That day, Taejin heard that Sunja wasn't feeling well and came to visit his son's house. But Sunja wasn't there, and neither was Haisu. Taejin wondered if Sunja was seriously ill, but Miho said that his mother-in-law must be relying on her daughter. The mother and daughter had conspired to go out for the weekend and talk badly about him to Haisu. Hearing his son's words, the father flew into a rage and slapped him. Just a few days ago, you said you couldn't live without your mother-in-law, but now you're talking behind her back. Ever since she came back, the house has been clean spotless. Look at what you've turned it into. The old father then took part of his monthly pension and told his son to give it to his mother-in-law. At her age, she has to come over every day to cook for you. As a son-in-law, you should also express your feelings. However, because he gave too much money, Taejin didn't have enough pocket money for this month. Suki also spent too much money going out this month. The couple then suggested playing a game together, but Taejin's luck was terrible, and he ended up with only a few coins left. Just as he was about to grab the money back, Suki pushed him aside. Miho gave the money to his mother-in-law to show his feelings. Sunja not only refused to take the money but also scolded her son-in-law harshly. She couldn't understand what was wrong with her son-in-law. He came to help them save money on a nanny so they could buy a house sooner. But this good-for-nothing son-in-law was always wasting money. Sunja's habitual slap made Miho feel very uncomfortable. He even began to wonder if his mother-in-law really hated him. All the time, he was filled with fear. As long as his wife wasn't home, he dared not go back. He could only sit at the bus stop waiting for Haisu to return. But he never expected to be seen by his mother, who had just returned. His mother asked him with concern why he didn't go home but was sleeping here instead. Miho didn't want to reveal the reason, but under his mother's relentless questioning, he finally said with a sense of injustice, "My mother-in-law always hits me." Suki couldn't swallow her anger and stormed over to confront her daughter-in-law, accusing her of teaming up with her mother to bully her son. Haisu explained that there must have been a misunderstanding, but Suki didn't listen and scolded her daughter-in-law harshly. She demanded that she take care of the household chores herself and stop relying on Sunja for help. She felt her son had suffered so much, but Haisu couldn't understand why women always had to sacrifice. Men only had to earn money and do nothing else for the family. Why was it so unfair? That night, Haisu saw her husband sleeping at the bus stop. In a fit of anger, she dragged him back home and vented all her frustration on her husband. Miho also revealed why he disliked his mother-in-law and cried that he never wanted her to come to their house again. Haisu felt helpless for marrying such a mama's boy. The next day, Haisu went to her mother's house hoping her mother wouldn't snap at Miho so easily, but Sunja flew into a rage upon hearing her daughter's words. "I help take care of the children all day long and cook the food he likes. In the end, he just ends up stressed out." Actually, Sunja was even more angry that her daughter didn't understand her and even blamed her for hitting her son-in-law. She had been a widow for over 20 years, working herself to death to raise 3 daughters, and this was the result she got? Sunja couldn't take it anymore and grabbed her daughter by the hair and started beating her. She never expected Haisu to say such hurtful words, but Haisu still didn't realize her mistake. Her uncle was so angry he wanted to beat her up right there. After returning home, Haisu began to realize her mistake and called her mother countless times, but her mother refused to answer. In a fit of anger, Haisu decided to sell the things her husband had bought with half of their living expenses. When her daughter saw her mother packing up her father's treasures, she rushed to her grandmother's house. Meanwhile, Suki was preparing a delicious meal for her son. When Lucy arrived out of breath, her grandmother didn't even offer her a single piece of chicken. Miho learned that Haisu was packing up his fishing rod. He couldn't finish his meal and rushed home in a frenzy. But Haisa had no choice. The money her husband earned and the money her mother saved by taking care of the children had all been spent on those items. Since he was against his mother taking care of the children, Haisu had no choice but to sell these things to hire a nanny. Hearing her daughter-in-law speak so harshly to her son, the mother-in-law couldn't take it anymore. "It's because you look down on Miho that you dare to treat him this way." Faced with her mother-in-law's injustice, Haisu also expressed her dissatisfaction. She worked hard to earn money, but he went out fishing with his friends. Suki tried to justify it by saying it was because Miho was under too much pressure. Haisu retorted that she was also under pressure. Suki believed that her daughter-in-law was saying that because she wasn't helping take care of the children. Her words not only shocked the entire family but also scared the granddaughter into crying hysterically. Hayami, who had been single for over 30 years, brought a man home for the first time. Her mother and uncle were so surprised they froze in place. Although Hayami introduced him as her subordinate, Sunja immediately recognized that he would make an excellent son-in-law. She even thought of a name for her future grandson. Jae-hyuk poured water while inquiring about Taemin's age. This made Taemin, who was unaware of the situation, feel very embarrassed. Sunja then rushed out to call her eldest daughter to describe Taemin's appearance, asking if he was the man she had met last time. But Haisu was still upset from arguing with her mother a few days earlier and had no interest in answering her questions. Sunja told her younger brother to take good care of them and said she was going out to buy some fruit. Taemin scolded Hayami for not telling him earlier that they were coming over for dinner. Coming empty-handed to meet the elders felt really embarrassing. It seemed like Taemin had overthought things, thinking Hayami really wanted to bring him home to meet the parents. In fact, she had brought him to run errands at the market and then stopped by for a bite to eat. Just then, a group of customers came into the store. Hayami instinctively reached out to help. Taemin found himself increasingly attracted to Hayami in her apron. After dinner, Sunja tentatively began to inquire about Taemin's family situation. Upon learning that he had lost his mother at a young age, Sunja felt that the boy was truly pitiful. Before they could finish talking, Hayami told Taemin, who had been tired all day, to hurry home. But before Taemin could leave, Hayami received a call from her boss. It turned out that In-suk wanted Hayami to help her pick out some clothes. This made Hayami wonder if her boss was intentionally causing trouble for her late at night. After Taemin dropped her off, In-suk was indeed very picky. She even complained that Hayami had chosen such tasteless clothes for her. Was she supposed to wear these to the memorial service? Hayami was hurt and felt wronged by the insults. Taemin, who was waiting outside, was also very worried. He knew that his stepmother had never liked Hayami. When he saw Hayami come out with tears streaming down her face, Taemin anxiously asked her what had happened. But Hayami can only swallow all her grievances. She can't tell Taemin that In-suk is her biological mother. The next day, Taemin finds his stepmother and asks her why she is giving Hayami a hard time and doing all those trivial things. After listening to Taemin, In-suk realizes that her son must be seeing that woman often. She is even more afraid that her son will fall in love with a woman of low status. She has worked hard to raise him all these years so that he can take over as president. Hiding her identity and working here was also to let him learn from Hayami. Therefore, she absolutely wouldn't allow her son to get involved in other matters. Soon, The day of the company's 40th anniversary event arrived. Unexpectedly, a wealthy young lady accidentally spilled red wine on Hayami, but In-suk said she was just an employee, so there was no need to worry about it. Her words once again hurt Hayami's heart. Hayami couldn't bear to stay with this cruel mother anymore, so she decided to quit her job and study abroad. Hayami immediately shared her decision with Taemin. Taemin couldn't bear to let Hayami leave, but he had no reason to stop her. After returning home, Taemin asked Hayami why she had told him first. Before Hayami could explain, Taemin couldn't help but kiss her. Taemin's unreasonable behavior made Hayami very angry. In-suk knew Hayami couldn't play golf but deliberately invited her to accompany clients, to mock her lowly background and imply she wasn't worthy of being a department head. Her motive was clear: Hayami's outstanding performance had already surpassed her own. In-suk's repeated hurtful actions had completely shattered Hayami's heart. Without hesitation, Hayami submitted her resignation letter. Hayami's swift decision to resign came as a surprise to In-suk. It left her feeling both relieved and regretful that the company was losing such a talented employee. Taemin went crazy when he heard the news and rushed to find Hayami, but Hayami remained firm in her decision, and advised Taemin that if he had other feelings for her, he should give up early. Taemin didn't understand why. If she didn't want to work here, she couldn't just go to another company instead of choosing to go abroad. Was it because of his behavior that day? Hayami said she didn't hate Taemin and that she was leaving the company because of personal matters. She couldn't tell anyone about this secret. Unexpectedly, the next day, In-suk suddenly came to find Hayami. It turned out that the project Hayami had worked on was taken over by another department and had some flaws. So In-suk asked Hayami if she could finish up the work before leaving. Although she wasn't very willing, she eventually agreed to In-suk's request. She did the follow-up work perfectly, but In-suk couldn't figure out why she suddenly saw herself in Hayami. The company president was very angry when he heard that Hayami was quitting. He told Hayami that he would contact her through his secretary in a few days. So In-suk took the initiative to ask her to have dinner together that night. But Hayami never expected that In-suk would cook herself. She hadn't eaten her mother's cooking in more than 20 years. This suddenly made Hayami feel indescribable emotions. Moreover, neither of them liked salad. In-suk was curious about what kind of parents could raise such an excellent daughter. Hayami tearfully told her that her mother ran a small eatery. At that moment, Hayami could no longer control her emotions. She suddenly lost control, leaving In-suk feeling panicked. This made In-suk immediately think of the daughter she had abandoned years ago. She then investigated all the files related to Hayami. Upon seeing Hayami's childhood photos, In-suk finally confirmed that she was indeed the daughter she had abandoned years ago. Thinking back to the time she had been at the company, Hayami had always targeted her no matter what. At that moment, In-suk finally understood that Hayami was blaming her for not recognizing her, facing her daughter whom she hadn't seen in over 20 years. In-suk couldn't help but cry uncontrollably. She longed to embrace this daughter who had been on her mind day and night. And at that moment, Hayami also forgave her mother. The mother and daughter embraced each other and wept bitterly. After reuniting with her mother, Hayami finally let go of the burden she had been carrying in her heart for many years. She also decided to give up going abroad and stay at the company to work hard. At the same time, Hayami didn't want to run away from her feelings for Taemin. This made Taemin very excited. But at the crucial moment, a reporter found In-suk and brought up the fact that she had abandoned her daughter. What In-suk didn't expect was that the president also had doubts about her because of Hayami's resignation. In order to protect herself, In-suk betrayed her daughter once again. That day, Suki left her young granddaughter alone to eat ice cream. She then turned around and went on a date with a friend she hadn't seen in days. Lucy was startled by her grandmother's cute antics. As she reached out to pick up the spoon, she accidentally fell to the ground. Seeing the child crying hysterically, everyone wondered why there were no family members around her. But Suki lowered her head, unwilling to admit that it was her granddaughter. To her surprise, Lucy immediately threw herself into her grandmother's arms. The old friends nearly laughed out loud. It turned out that Suki had always been the most carefree among the sisters. She had always insisted on never helping to take care of her grandchildren. But because she was angry with her mother-in-law, she had taken on the responsibility of watching the children. She had promised to do everything to ensure her granddaughter got into Seoul National University. Not only did she teach her to greet people properly, she also made her listen to classical music all day long to cultivate a ladylike image. Lucy hurriedly threw herself into her mother's arms, but her mother-in-law told Haisu to hurry up and finish Lucy's leftovers. She also warned her that if she dared to leave food on her plate again, she would be in big trouble. Only after her father-in-law's angry roar did her mother-in-law quiet down. Haesu looked at the half bowl of cold rice and felt extremely uncomfortable. She had been busy all day and still had a pile of dishes to wash. When her husband came home, her mother-in-law asked her to cook dinner immediately. Then she asked her to take the fish out of the refrigerator and fry it. Seeing her mother-in-law's fussy behavior, the daughter-in-law was filled with anger. Haesu really wanted to kill her lazy husband. Sunja got dressed and ready to go out with her sisters to enjoy the flowers. She hadn't had a chance to go out in 6 years since her grandchild was born. This time, she finally had time to relax. When Suki found out that Sunja was going out, she was furious. She was working hard at home taking care of the children, but Sunja was going out to have fun. On the contrary, her father-in-law was very supportive of this. Suki was so angry at her husband for scolding her in front of her daughter-in-law that she almost got into a fight with him. On the way home, Haesu felt incredibly depressed because she couldn't spend time with her daughter. At that moment, she ran into Miho. It turned out that Miho had been craving his mother-in-law's cooking. While his mother was out, he asked his uncle to sneak some back for him, but just as he was about to get home, he accidentally spilled the kimchi all over the floor. He was about to clean it up when Haesu saw him, but Miho was too proud to admit it. What a man! In-suk knew from the day she married him that her husband had ulterior motives. So over the years, he never treated her like a human being. He merely saw her as a free nanny for his son. However, In-suk loved Taemin deeply, and despite their lack of blood relation, their bond was strong. But one day, In-suk discovered that her stepson was in love with her own daughter. This was something she could never accept. If the two of them really got together, her relationship with Hayami would be exposed. All her years of sacrifice would be for nothing. In a fit of anger, she went back to Sunja and blamed her for not sending Hayami abroad as she had requested. If that had happened, at least they wouldn't have to work at the same company anymore. Sunja finally realized that In-suk knew the truth about Hayami. In-suk confronted Sunja, asking if she had embezzled the money and spent it on her own child. Hearing In-suk slander her like that, Sunja's heart was shattered. She never expected that after raising Hayami with so much effort, In-suk not only showed no gratitude but also blamed her for not sending Hayami away. Hearing In-suk speak to her mother like that, Haesu flew into a rage. She then kicked the shameless woman out of the house. When Hayami returned, Sunja angrily asked her why she had done such a thing. If she truly considered herself a mother, she should have told her about meeting In-suk. Hayami kept apologizing to her mother. The four of them cried together. Sunja then took out every penny In-suk had given her and returned it to Hayami. She hadn't sent Hayami abroad because she didn't want to abandon her like her own mother had. She had kept the money all this time to give to Hayami when she got married. It seemed there was no need for that now. In-suk has already arranged for Hayami to study abroad in hopes that she will leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, once their mother-daughter relationship is exposed, there will be no happy ending for either of them. But Hayami has changed her mind about going abroad. Looking at In-suk's expression, Hayami realizes that her mother is only doing this for her own sake. After Hayami leaves, Secretary Yoon, who has been with the president for many years, suddenly appears. In-suk finally realized that her husband had been watching her all along. But In-suk had done Secretary Yoon a favor, so he advised her to deal with the matter as soon as possible. Otherwise, even if she didn't say anything, it would quickly reach the president's ears. In-suk found Hayami and Taemin one after another and confessed that she knew about their relationship, hoping that they would break up immediately. But the two had already given their hearts to each other, so how could they just break up? In the end, In-suk had no choice but to tell the president about their relationship. When President Min found out, he flew into a rage. How could his son, the son of the president, get involved with his boss? If this got out, they would be laughed at. In-suk didn't think Taemin was to blame. Hayami was beautiful, smart, and capable. What man wouldn't be attracted to her? So now the best solution was to fire Hayami and send her abroad. Suki started complaining about how hard she had been working after taking care of her granddaughter for 3 days. Her ultimate goal was to ask her daughter-in-law for some compensation for her efforts. Taejin thought his wife's face was thick to the extreme. Sacrificing for one's children is what parents do. How could she have the nerve to ask her son for money when she knew he was struggling? Would she become a millionaire by taking money from her children? Haesu also began to worry about this matter. With no other choice, she can only take out her mother's fixed deposit. Haesu feels really guilty towards her mother. Her mother is already in poor health from taking care of her children. A few days ago, she accidentally hurt her waist. She gave her mother-in-law $1,000,001 for her hard work for her children. Now her mother is sick, and she can't even give her 100,000 won. Haisu is so sad that she can't help but cry. After work, she buys her mother's favorite strawberries, but her mother told her to take them back to the children. Haisu wanted to spend more time with her mother, so she fed her mother some strawberries. When she returned, Haisu also brought back a cake that her grandmother had bought for her daughter. Miho was discussing with his mother whether they should return the money. Suki thought that her daughter-in-law had come to say the same thing. Unexpectedly, Haisu placed the money in front of her mother-in-law and even brought back the cake. Miho sought his mother trying to take the money, and the mother and son began to fight over it. Taejin was so angry that he scolded his wife for being too much. Does she want to throw a celebration party after taking the money? He was so angry that he threw the cake on the table. Lucy saw this and was scared to tears. Miho returned home and shamelessly said that since that was the case, he might as well ask his mother-in-law for help. Now, because your mother gave up the money, you want to hand the child over to my mother. This time, Haisu could no longer control her long-suppressed anger. The next day, Taejin found his daughter-in-law and apologized for doing such a foolish thing for his son. Fortunately, Haisu's father-in-law was reasonable, so she felt a little comforted. On their way home, Miho saw them. Miho angrily asked his father whose side he was on. It turned out that he was preparing to divorce Haisu because he had been beaten. Hearing his son say such things, the father knew he had to teach him a lesson. He beat his son severely and finished with a perfect shoulder throw. Meanwhile, Suki at home made up an excuse to go out and asked her husband to watch the children. But Taejin immediately exposed her scheme. Since she had taken her daughter-in-law's money, she should properly take care of the children. The money wasn't mine, so why should I take care of them? Suki was so angry that she threw her bag down and turned to go back to her room. Unexpectedly, her granddaughter found a set of sexy underwear in her grandmother's bag. Taejin almost had a heart attack when he saw it. Just then, Miho came back to discuss divorcing Haisu with him. Taemin finally understood why Hayami had been so preoccupied lately. He then frantically searched every place Hayami might have gone, but he couldn't find Hayami anywhere, so he had no choice but to go home. To his surprise, as soon as he reached the door, he saw Hayami sitting there waiting for him. He gently helped her up. Hayami knew she had neglected Taemin because of all the things she had been going through, so she felt very sorry. Taemin understood she must have her own reasons, so he didn't ask any questions. He simply held her close and comforted her with warmth. At that moment, he made up his mind to become Hayami's eternal support. In the morning, Hayami shyly turned around to run away but was caught by Taemin. Seeing Hayami's blushing face, Taemin teased her intentionally. Then he took out a pair of matching rings and put one on Hayami's finger. As a strong-willed woman, Hayami had never imagined that her heart would be entrusted to a man. But the good times didn't last long. President Min came to the company and deliberately mocked Hayami in a meeting. Fortunately, In-suk came to Hayami's rescue in time. In-suk knew that this matter couldn't be delayed any longer. She could only muster up the courage to ask Sunja to persuade Hayami to go abroad. Sunja understood that sending Hayami abroad for further studies would be better for her future. She also knew that her daughter was reluctant to leave because she was worried about her. This left Sunja feeling extremely conflicted. Even her high heels seemed to be against her. That night, Sunja spent the entire night thinking it over. The next morning, she went straight to her daughter's company, but after hesitating for a long time, Sunja still couldn't bring herself to say it. Hayami knew her mother must have something important to say. Under her daughter's persistent questioning, Sunja took out the money she had saved for Hayami over the years. She hoped she wouldn't become a burden to her and wanted Hayami to live the life she desired. Hayami immediately guessed that In-suk must have approached her mother, which is why she suddenly made such a decision. So Hayami angrily went to find In-suk. She knew that In-suk was afraid her presence would hinder her future, so she had gone to great lengths to send her away. Although President Min had always admired Hayami's talent, he would never allow a woman without a family background to become his son's wife. To prevent losing such a talented person, he decided to promote her and transfer her to an overseas company. But unexpectedly, Taemin decided to give up his inheritance and go abroad with Hayami to avoid being separated from her. President Min never imagined his son would make such a choice for a woman. Seeing Taemin leave, his stepmother hurriedly chased after him to persuade him not to be so stubborn. But Taemin couldn't understand why his mother had never cared about others' social status. She even treated her own driver like family. Why did she suddenly care so much about Hayami's family background? This made In-suk realize that Taemin must be truly in love with Hyami. Sure enough, that night, Taemin asked Hyami out and solemnly proposed to her. Although they hadn't been together for long, Taemin had thought long and hard before making this decision. Unexpectedly, Hyami rejected him. Taemin couldn't understand why. When another senior executive at the company learned about Hyami and Taemin, he thought the president was being foolish. It's rare to marry a woman like Hyami. What's the point of marrying the daughter of a wealthy family? After thinking it over, President Min agreed that this was indeed the case, so he told In-suk his thoughts. He also said that having Hyami assist Taemin would definitely be more beneficial for the company's future development. Although In-suk firmly opposed the idea, she didn't have a better reason to convince her husband. At the same time, Taemin submitted his resignation in order to be with Hyami. Hyami couldn't understand why Taemin had suddenly made such a decision, but Hyami had no confidence that she could manage her married life. However, she didn't want to betray Taemin's sincere feelings for her. She could only tell him about how she had been abandoned by her mother when she was a child. Hyami was only strong on the outside, but the nightmares of her childhood had left a deep scar on her. Taemin finally understood the real reason why Hyami had rejected him. However, President Min was furious when he found out that his son was resigning. In-suk thought that the best solution was to reveal Taemin's true identity. Whether the two could end up together was still uncertain. President Min also thought it was a good idea. After Hyami confessed her secret, the weight on her heart was finally lifted. Taemin planned to tell Hyami about his true identity after she returned from her business trip. Before leaving, Hyami called her mother to tell her that she would bring her boyfriend home in 2 days. Upon hearing this news, Sunja was overjoyed. Little did she know that Taemin would soon receive the secret that his identity was about to be revealed. He angrily rushed to confront his father, but his father was furious about his decision to resign. If it weren't for this, he might have agreed to their marriage. He couldn't let his son ruin his future for a woman. Now he wanted his son to replace Hyami as the company's department head. If Taemin refused, he would make sure Hyami couldn't survive in this industry. That day, Suki started throwing a tantrum for no apparent reason. Taejin asked her if it was because he hadn't let her wear that red lingerie set. Even if you dress up nicely, you're still a 60-year-old woman. How could you wear something your daughter-in-law wouldn't even wear? Suki was so angry that she couldn't say a word. Haisu was a few minutes late coming home and was rushing back. Unexpectedly, as soon as she got home, her mother-in-law took her anger out on her. Suki even threw the money her daughter-in-law had given her for her hard work in her face. With nowhere to vent her anger, Haisu could only drink to forget her troubles. She hated the world for being so unfair. Why did her mother-in-law and husband always find ways to bully her? Suki was about to go out when she ran into her drunken daughter-in-law. Haisu took advantage of the alcohol to express all her dissatisfaction with her mother-in-law. She even humiliated her mother-in-law. Before her mother-in-law could respond, she collapsed in the flower bed. Early the next morning, Suki came to find her daughter-in-law to argue, but Haisu no longer wants to be her in-law's punching bag. She has been putting up with it for so many years. Not only does her mother-in-law look down on her, but she even treats her mother as a free babysitter. When Miho comes home from work, his mother-in-law fries fish for him, while she can only eat the cold leftovers from her children. Why can't her mother-in-law see how hard she works after all these years? Suki is speechless and can only yell at her. Unexpectedly, Haisu does not indulge her temper this time. The mother-in-law felt extremely frustrated after being lectured by her daughter-in-law. However, Taejin believed that they deserved what they got. This made Suki even angrier. She decided that she would never help her daughter-in-law take care of the children again. Suki then found her best friend to complain. Unexpectedly, when she returned, she ran into their teacher. Suki immediately put away her unreasonable attitude. The teacher warmly escorted Suki home. Having admired Suki for a long time, a few kind words made her blush with joy. Suki also felt a sense of emptiness in her heart for not having seen the teacher recently. But the old man took the opportunity to grab Suki's hand. Just as the two struggled to break free, they were spotted by Haisu. Now that her daughter-in-law had caught her in the act, Suki was in big trouble. Sure enough, Suki came to her daughter-in-law the next day to explain. In order to curry favor with her daughter-in-law, she even offered to help take care of her child in the future. Haisu was so excited that she couldn't help but laugh wildly. In all these years, she had never felt so happy. Her colleagues were so scared that they thought Haisu had been driven crazy by her mother-in-law. Her father-in-law also packed his things and prepared to leave home. But she never imagined that after dedicating her entire life to this family, All she was left with were a few old clothes and 3 books. Upon learning of her husband's plans, Suki not only failed to stop him but also helped him find his underwear and socks. Just as Taejin was about to leave, his granddaughter pushed open the door. Seeing the two of them so intimate, he assumed the old woman had been driven mad by something. What he never expected was that the grandmother would actively go to the supermarket to buy snacks for her granddaughter. On her way back, Suki ran into Teacher Park again. Teacher Park had noticed Suki's attire and the upscale neighborhood she lived in, and was certain she was a wealthy woman. He then pretended to be pitiful and asked Suki for money. Just as Teacher Park was persistently pestering her, Taejin happened to see them. His scheme was immediately exposed by Taejin. Fortunately, Miho and Haisu, who had just gotten off work, saw them and stopped the commotion. Taejin was so angry that he tried to smash his fake face worth 30 million won. Suki explained that she liked his pottery class and that it wasn't what he thought. But Taejin felt that no matter what, getting into a fight like that was embarrassing. Suki was so upset that she almost cried. Miho saw his mother cause such an ugly scene and secretly rejoiced. He could use this to get his mother to help take care of the children, and make her reflect on her actions while she was taking care of them. Haisu felt that her husband was really heartless. How could he use something like this to threaten his mother-in-law? When Haisu rushed over, her mother-in-law couldn't help but shed tears. She had worked hard to take care of her in-laws her whole life, doing housework and cooking every day. Now, just mentioning cooking made her feel upset. She had wanted to go out and see the world and participate in some entertainment activities for seniors before she couldn't walk anymore. She never expected to be accused of cheating. After listening to her mother-in-law's tearful explanation, Haisu gradually understood her predicament. She really didn't understand why women's lives were so miserable. However, in order to maintain the family, Suki took the initiative to apologize to her husband. Haisu suddenly felt a pang of sadness when she saw her mother-in-law strain her back while carrying her child. When she got home, she discussed it with her husband and decided to hire a nanny. But Miho thought Haisu was crazy and strongly opposed her suggestion. Haisu knew that the reason her husband opposed it was because he didn't want to spend money. What was even more infuriating was that he spent most of the family's money on fishing. So Haisu told him to get his fishing rod out. In fact, Miho was afraid that his wife would sell his fishing rod, so he had hidden it away. Today was the day Taemin officially took over the company. When he changed into an expensive suit and stood in front of all the leaders, no one could believe that this junior employee was the president's son. The team leader who had bullied him in the past was so scared that he didn't know what to do. After working for so long, no one had ever guessed he was the son of a wealthy family. The person who found it hardest to accept was Hayami. She couldn't bear the thought that the man she loved had deceived her. But Hayami never imagined that Taemin had agreed to take over the company for her sake. If he didn't follow his father's wishes, Hayami would be unable to survive in this industry. Taemin couldn't watch Hayami's life be ruined, so he agreed to his father's conditions. From now on, everything concerning Hayami will be handled by him personally, and no one else is allowed to harm her in any way. As soon as Taemin finished handling the takeover, he hurriedly called Hayami over. Before Taemin could explain, Hayami slapped him across the face. She then threw a resignation letter in front of him. Hayami hated her mother for not telling her about Taemin's identity sooner. Was it because she was afraid that once she knew his true identity, she would marry him for wealth and status just like you did? In-suk urged her daughter not to underestimate the connections of a wealthy family. She didn't want Hayami to live a life of suffering and humiliation like she had. But Hayami believed her mother was just making excuses for herself. She also hoped In-suk would always remember one thing. This morning in the hall, you went out of your way to please that family, and once again abandoned your own daughter to protect the man you had loved and raised since childhood. Afterward, Taemin tried repeatedly to explain himself to Hayami. Although Taemin hadn't revealed his true identity earlier, his proposal to marry Hayami wasn't just empty words. But Hayami no longer believed Taemin's explanations. She didn't want any emotional entanglement with him. President Min didn't want to lose Hayami's talent either. He promised to support her and train her to become a respected company representative like In-suk. But Hayami said she didn't want to become like In-suk. President Min didn't expect Hayami to have such ambition. Hayami then cut her long hair and prepared to return to the company. When she got out of the president's car, The person who found it most unacceptable was In-suk, but In-suk knew how dangerous chaebol families were. She couldn't just stand by and watch her daughter recklessly return to the company. She also couldn't guess what kind of deal Hayami had made with the president. In-suk rushed over to find Hayami and angrily scolded her for not listening to her. But Hayami said that she stayed by the president's side with her own abilities. She didn't climb to this position by being her mother's concubine, knowing the president as she did. In-suk knew that once he found out about her relationship with Hayami, President Min would definitely think that the mother and daughter were teaming up against him. It's best to get Hayami out of the picture before he finds out. Since that's the case, Hayami doesn't understand why her mother can't sacrifice herself for her once. Thus, the mother-daughter relationship is completely severed. Taemin also finds his father. He's afraid Hayami will get hurt, so he also wants to know what kind of deal his father made with her. President Min thought his son was too stupid. In the workplace, one must have ambition like Hayami, so he wanted to use 2 years to let Hayami assist Taemin and then let him take over the position of group president. Hayami couldn't accept this melodramatic relationship between them and chose to break up. But Taemin didn't want to give up this relationship. He vowed to make Hayami fall in love with him again. That day, they went out together to inspect the work, and Hayami almost sprained her ankle again. Taemin rushed forward to support Hayami. This phrase, which Hayami had heard countless times, instantly touched her heart. The familiar yet boyfriend returned to Hayami's side. But now, in this superior-subordinate relationship, Hayami must keep her head clear. Taemin, however, couldn't bear to let go. He just wanted to hold the woman he deeply loved in a private place. Taemin knew that Hayami had followed her father's orders to assist him in order to drive away his stepmother and take her place. But even so, he couldn't control his feelings for Hayami. Hayami admitted that Taemin was indeed the first man she had ever loved, but she had fallen in love with the man he was back then, not the wealthy tycoon he had become. Although Taemin had hidden his identity at the time, he was still the same person he had been back then, and his feelings for Hayami had not changed at all. Hayami thought she could control her feelings for Taemin, but she never expected him to disregard his status and frequently come looking for her. Not only did he hold her hand in public, but he also deliberately brought her to the company cafeteria to eat. He even found the most gossip-loving colleague and publicly revealed their former relationship. What made Hayami unable to resist was that Taemin took off his expensive suit and returned to his former self as a lowly office worker. Taemin told Hayami that he had planned to reveal his true identity to her after she returned from her business trip. However, the complex relationships within the tycoon family made things difficult. Hayami had only been away for 2 days, and such a drastic change had occurred. Taemin didn't know how to explain it. He hoped that Hayami wouldn't forget that no matter what happened, he would always be the lowly office worker in her heart. But Taemin didn't know that the reason Hayami rejected him wasn't just because of his chaebol status. The main reason was that they had the same mother. Although they weren't related by blood, Hayami couldn't continue to hide the truth from Taemin, so she ordered her mother to reveal their mother-daughter relationship. Soon, this news reached the president's ears. Not only did President Min not object, he ordered Hayami to marry his son immediately. Although Hayami's family was poor, the president greatly admired her talent. He knew that having Hayami work for the company would not only help his son rise quickly, but also contribute to the future development of the company. President Min advised Hayami that instead of working so hard, she should find a decent husband to help her. Unexpectedly, Hayami refused the president's request on the spot. Although she refused on the surface, the tears in her eyes did not fool the president. President Min even suspected that she was trying to use this method to capture a man's heart. After all, in his eyes, no woman could refuse money and status. However, Hayami, with her strong sense of self-esteem, did not give in to the president. If things continued like this, she would rather be transferred to a company overseas. Although he couldn't persuade this woman, President Min felt that Hayami's poor mother would not be able to resist the temptation of money. Soon, Sunja received an invitation from the president. Having suffered her whole life, Sunja had never seen such a scene before. When she stepped into the mansion, she was so nervous she couldn't move. President Min sized up the shabby woman from head to toe, unable to suppress a smirk. But Sunja never imagined that President Min had invited her for Hayami's marriage. However, his condescending attitude infuriated her. He believed his foolish son had been blinded by love. In this lifetime, he would marry no one but Hayami. There were no parents who could outsmart their children, so he had no choice but to support the marriage. President Min also thought that it must be very hard for Sunja to raise 3 daughters on her own. Once the marriage was settled, Sunja would no longer have to run a snack bar. These words deeply hurt Sunja's pride. Sunja bluntly told the president that it was his son who was pursuing her daughter. If they didn't love each other, there was no need to get them married. Besides, she wasn't worried about her daily meals, so he didn't need to take care of her. President Min, who had spent his entire life boasting about his achievements, was being rebuked for the first time in his life. Sunja's attitude not only failed to anger him but also prompted him to apologize to Sunja for his rash behavior. He also stated that he would arrange the wedding for the two children this month. Although Sunja despised President Min, she was very satisfied with her future son-in-law. However, In-suk firmly opposed the marriage. She even threatened her husband that if he didn't cancel the engagement, she would leave the family. Taemin also opposed his father's decision. He wanted to win Hyami's heart through his own efforts. In-suk feared that the poor Hyami might succumb to the temptation of money and agree to the marriage. Therefore, she had to let Sunja know about her relationship with Taemin. Upon learning that In-suk is Taemin's stepmother, Sunja is stunned. Since she couldn't stop Hyami, she came to beg Sunja. She also couldn't bear to see her daughter marry into the same family as her. Sunja doesn't understand what sin her daughter committed in her past life to deserve such punishment from heaven. She was abandoned by her mother as a child and finally fell in love with a man, only to find out he was another woman's stepson. Seeing her daughter suffer such pain, Sunja's heart is breaking. Miho couldn't afford his daughter's tuition, so he secretly bought a house full of toys. To have his own space, he even rented a room in a hotel. That night, Miho was about to go out again when he was caught by his wife, who had just gotten off work. Miho was so scared he broke out in a cold sweat. To escape his wife's clutches, he lied, saying that the bank manager's father had suddenly passed away and he had to go immediately. After successfully deceiving his wife, Miho was overjoyed. But the next day, the foolish Miho lied again, claiming that the bank manager's mother had passed away. Within just one day, both elderly relatives had passed away, leaving Haisu utterly baffled. That day, he tried to escape again, but was caught by his wife. She was so busy and had no idea where her husband was going. What was even more incomprehensible was that this man with no brain claimed he had to attend the bank manager's daughter's first birthday party. Haisu saw that her husband was lying and immediately followed him out. Miho was so scared that he ran away as soon as he saw his wife. This only made Haisu suspect him even more. Seeing that his wife was about to catch up, he hurriedly jumped into the bushes at a turn. But Haisu was curious, how could he have run so fast from here? Not caught by his wife, Miho was overjoyed. But when he returned, he wasn't so lucky. His wife and daughter were waiting for him like door gods. This time, not only Haisu but even his daughter questioned him about where he had gone. But Miho couldn't reveal his secret even if it meant dying. In the end, Haisu was so angry that she had to resort to extreme measures to vent her anger. She never expected that her husband not only reformed but also stayed out all night. Haisu couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. Her best friend believed that if a man showed such signs, he must be seeing another woman, so she urged Haisu to find proof. But Haisu was too busy working and taking care of the children to have time to follow her husband. That night, Haisu went back to her parents' house to gather with her sisters. Sure enough, Miho took the opportunity to go play games, but just as he was leaving the hotel, he was caught red-handed by Haisu's best friend. Haisu heard about her husband's actions the previous night and was so angry she nearly fainted. She then cried her way back to her parents' house to find her mother. How could a mother tolerate her daughter being treated this way? The four of them stormed to the hotel, determined to teach that man a lesson. At that moment, Miho was inside enjoying a massage. When Sunja arrived at the door and heard the loud noises inside, she was so angry that she burst in. The sudden appearance of his mother-in-law scared Miho so much that he jumped to the ground. But Sunja didn't give her son-in-law a chance to explain. She immediately grabbed his hair. Hayami saw all the items scattered around the room and realized something was wrong. At that moment, Haisu also understood everything. Miho's childish behavior made Haisu very angry. To punish her husband, she chose to separate from him. Hayami married the man she loved most, but she was not happy. Taemin did not know about her secret. Hayami wanted to break off her relationship with Taemin because of this secret, but by chance, she heard the president's mistress investigating her identity. Once it was discovered that she and Taemin had the same mother, not only would Taemin be hurt, but he would also become a laughingstock in the financial world. To protect Taemin, Hayami defied her mother's opposition and insisted on marrying him. After marriage, Hayami wanted to live with Taemin for the rest of her life, but she feared that if she ever disappointed him after marriage, she would never be forgiven. However, Taemin promised to protect her for the rest of his life. After marriage, the two lived a sweet and happy life. They often returned to their mother-in-law's home to visit. Sunja knew that being the daughter-in-law of a wealthy family wasn't easy, so she told her daughter that if she ever faced any injustice, she must come back to her mother immediately. Soon after, Taemin learned from his uncle that his stepmother had abandoned her biological daughter. He quickly went to the address she had given him. When Taemin arrived at the entrance of Hayami's shop, he suddenly remembered what Hayami had said about being abandoned by her mother. He connected this to his stepmother's unreasonable opposition to his marriage to Hayami and considered Hayami's recent behavior. Taemin suddenly realized that something was wrong, and the more he thought about it, the more frightened he became. Taemin then went to find his mother to confirm his suspicions. In-suk knew that this would eventually be discovered, so she had no choice but to admit that Hayami was her daughter. Taemin never imagined that something like this would happen to him, and it caused him great pain. When the couple met again, Taemin's attitude changed completely. He wanted to know what Hayami's purpose was in marrying him. Haisu hired a nanny who not only refused to clean the house but also refused to make dinner for the children. Lucy came home from school hungry and could only eat cold rice. While the nanny sat on the sofa chatting, she accidentally knocked over a cup of water, and the nanny flew into a rage. She even threatened the child, saying that if she dared to tell her mother, she would call the police to arrest her. That day, Suki came to greet the nanny who had just started work. As soon as she entered, she saw the nanny sitting on the sofa, chatting while the air conditioner was on. Upon seeing someone return, the nanny hurriedly turned off the TV. She made an excuse, saying she had just dropped the child off at school and was resting on the sofa for a moment. However, after returning, Suki felt that something was off about this person. That night, she urged her daughter-in-law to fire the nanny. However, finding a nanny who could take care of the children and help with housework was no easy task. Haisu had planned to talk to the nanny, but as soon as she opened her mouth, the nanny burst into tears. She claimed that many elderly people were suspicious of new nannies and used various methods to make their lives difficult. She also complained that being constantly monitored was unbearable. That day, Haisu called the nanny dozens of times, but she didn't answer. Haisu rushed home in a panic, but as soon as she opened the door, her daughter ran into her arms. Looking at her daughter's expression, Haisu felt something was off. The frightened child dared not say anything and obediently returned to the sofa. The nanny lied, saying she had forgotten to cook because she took the child out to play and didn't have time to clean the house. Although Haisu felt uneasy, she didn't say much. Lucy found the nanny's lies disgusting and began to hate her. To her surprise, her mother blamed her for not changing her clothes after school. Lucy angrily turned and ran back to her room. After a long day at work, Haisa had to clean the house herself. The next day, Lucy was late for kindergarten because she was moving slowly. The nanny angrily scolded the child. This scene was witnessed by the security guard in the neighborhood. The security guard then reported the incident to Lucy's father. However, Haisu didn't believe it at all. She had already confirmed with the child that this was the same auntie. She thought it might be because the nanny was in a hurry that she had pulled the child. Miho suspected that his wife might have been caught by the nanny. Not only did he have to clean the house himself every day, but he also had to speak up for her. Haisu urged her husband to confirm the situation with the child first, but the considerate Lucy knew she had caused her parents a lot of trouble. She would rather endure the injustice herself than worry her parents. She even said that the nanny had gotten angry that morning because she had done something wrong. Until one day, Suki saw the nanny going out for a walk while her daughter-in-law was at work. She then went to her son's house. She found the house in a mess, with soy sauce mixed with rice on the table, and even discovered beer in the refrigerator. Suki was about to clean up when she heard the nanny coming back, so she secretly hid in the bathroom. The nanny came back, turned on the air conditioner, and took out a can of beer. Suki couldn't stand it anymore and exploded on the spot. The nanny then called Haisu to say she wanted to quit. When Haisu rushed back, she found the nanny already drunk. At that moment, she realized she had missed the time to pick up the child. Lucy walked to the front door but stopped in her tracks because she knew the woman inside wasn't her mother. So she got on the bus and headed toward her grandmother's house. At that moment, the nanny was lying on the sofa enjoying herself. When the owner came home from work, she realized she had forgotten to pick up the child. The family of four was so anxious they were about to lose their minds. Soki, furious, turned around to confront the nanny. The nanny, knowing she had caused trouble, tried to escape but was caught by Suki. Suki grabbed the nanny by the hair and gave her a severe scolding. But by nightfall, the family still hadn't found the child. Upon hearing that the police hadn't found the child either, Haisu was so scared she fainted. Lucy was sitting by the roadside crying when she was fortunately discovered by Haisa's uncle. By the time Jaehyuk brought the child back, Lucy had already fallen asleep from exhaustion. Haisa held her child and cried bitterly. She regretted not listening to her mother-in-law and husband. Because of her mistake, she almost caused a big mistake. After this incident, her husband also began to reflect on himself. He realized that it was his own incompetence that had caused his wife and child so much suffering. The next day, Haisu asked her daughter why she hadn't told her about the nanny she didn't like. The thoughtful Lucy knew that neither her grandmother nor her maternal grandmother could take care of her. She also knew how difficult it was for her mother to find a suitable nanny, so Lucy didn't want to cause her mother any more trouble. Haisu felt even more guilty toward her daughter. She decided to quit her job and take care of the children herself. But the next day, Haisu discovered that her lazy husband had started cleaning up after dinner, and even volunteered to help with household chores in the future. Her husband's sudden change made Haisu feel a bit uneasy. After putting the children to bed, Haisu found that Miho had not only tidied up the room but also prepared candles. Haisu suspected her husband had ulterior motives. Sure enough, before they could exchange a few words, her husband revealed his thoughts. If his wife really quit her job, they would soon become a poor family. Haisu couldn't understand why her husband couldn't consider the children's future. He went to such lengths just to prevent her from quitting her job. But her husband knelt on the ground begging his wife not to quit her job, because he wasn't yet capable of supporting the family. Haisu was so angry she wanted to beat this good-for-nothing man to death. Soki, who knew her daughter-in-law was planning to quit her job, shared the same thoughts as her son. It was difficult for the two of them to support the family on their salaries alone. If one person earned money, how would the other survive? Moreover, the child was still young and depended on his mother. When he grew up, he would surely ignore his unemployed mother. Her father-in-law knew that his daughter-in-law had had a difficult life, so he hoped that everyone would be more understanding. Hyami discovered that she was pregnant soon after marrying into a wealthy family. However, she was not happy about it. Her husband had not contacted her for several days after learning of her identity. Hyami knew her husband would definitely divorce her because of this. Although the two hadn't seen each other for days, Taemin would sneak back every day while his wife was asleep to see her. After Taemin left, Hyami slowly opened her eyes. The pain in their hearts made it impossible for them to face each other. In-suk decided to leave secretly to ensure the two children could live peacefully in this family. President Min knew that the only reason In-suk would give up everything was for the daughter she had abandoned years ago, but he never imagined that In-suk's biological daughter was his own son's wife. Upon hearing this news, President Min nearly died of anger. He was certain that the mother and daughter had married his son and him with a premeditated plan. Soon after, President Min had In-suk, who had been missing for days, brought back. He angrily demanded to know if Hyami was really her daughter. In-suk knew that she couldn't hide her mother-daughter relationship with Hyami, so she admitted the truth. After confirming this, President Min was furious. He asked her if she had married Hyami into the family to destroy his family, but In-suk no longer cared about money and power. She would never let the president hurt her daughter. From the day she abandoned her daughter, In-suk had received her just punishment. Every step a mother who abandons her child takes leaves blood on the ground. If you don't want to suffer that kind of pain, it's best not to mess with my daughter. Taemin was afraid that his father would hurt Hyami if he found out the truth. He hurriedly sent Hyami to a hotel and told her to turn off her phone and not contact anyone. Hyami guessed that the president must have found out about her relationship with In-suk. Afraid that her mother would be hurt, Hyami hurried back, but she happened to run into her mother on the way back. Hyami then turned around and followed her. In-suk knew that the only way her daughter could live peacefully with Taemin was if she disappeared completely. Seeing this, Hyami rushed over and hugged her mother. She told her mother that she was pregnant with Taemin's child. Hyami and her husband then took her mother to the hospital. Taemin asked Hyami why she didn't tell him about the pregnancy. Although he couldn't accept Hyami's relationship with his stepmother at the time, he had no intention of divorcing Hyami. Taemin finally understood the pain his stepmother and wife had felt at the time. They didn't want to tell him because they were afraid he would be hurt, so Taemin hoped Hyami would forgive him. After bringing the two women back, Taemin told his wife not to worry about his father. He would handle it himself. Sure enough, President Min told his son to divorce Hyami immediately, but Taemin said that he had known about this before they got married. So he was the one who had deceived his father. Sunja was seriously ill, but none of her children would accompany her to the hospital for a checkup. Her eldest daughter said she was going on a trip with her mother-in-law today. She called her second daughter, but she was preparing for a meeting, so Sunja didn't have the heart to ask her. In the end, she could only turn to her youngest daughter, who wasn't doing anything useful. But the youngest daughter suspected that her mother was trying to take her out on a blind date and refused outright. With no other options, Sunja went to the hospital alone. When she learned that she had late-stage lung cancer and only had 3 months to live, she was completely stunned. If she were to leave like this, how could she possibly feel at ease about her children? Her eldest daughter's life was in shambles, and her youngest daughter wasn't even married yet. Moreover, she had promised to help her second daughter take care of her children. Even her younger brother, who had been helping her for years, hadn't found a wife. With so many unresolved issues, how could Sunja possibly leave them behind? As soon as she returned home, Sunja went to her younger daughter's room and asked her when she planned to marry the editor-in-chief. But Hyerin said she no longer had any plans to marry. It turned out that Junwoo had been through a failed marriage and hadn't had the courage to remarry. Because of this, the two hadn't spoken for days. Sunja absolutely refuses to allow her daughter to marry a divorced man, but to ensure her daughter finds a home before she dies, the mother reluctantly agrees to let them marry. To her surprise, Hyerin stubbornly declares she wants to live with her mother for the rest of her life. Hearing this, Sunja loses her temper. You're already 32 years old and still asking your sister for money. You haven't gotten a job and your novel, which you've been writing for 10 years, hasn't made any progress. If I die, who will you rely on to live? Her mother's words hit Hyerin where it hurt. Thus, the mother and daughter had another fierce argument. Sunja regretted spoiling her daughter so much. She urged Hyami to get along well with her biological mother in the future. But Hyami insisted that Sunja must help raise her children. Sunja knew that this daughter, who had no blood relation to her, was the one who loved her the most and the only one who made her life easier. When night fell and everything was quiet, Sunja flipped through the calendar, counting down the days. But there were still 3 months left before it was time to make kimchi. If she waited any longer, the children would never get to eat the kimchi she made. Sunja told her brother to buy 100 cabbages the next morning. The sudden request for so many cabbages startled her brother. The next morning, Haisu returned home with the children. The most upsetting thing was that she had a severe allergic reaction after only being out for 1 day. Seeing her husband sleeping in the living room after getting drunk the night before, Haisu was even more angry. But before she had time to rest, she received a message from her mother asking them to help make kimchi. Her mother also called Hyami. Haisa angrily complained to her mother about why she had to make so much kimchi in the summer. She was exhausted from accompanying her mother-in-law out yesterday. The third child also said reluctantly, "Why do we have to be ordered around every year? When they find out how much effort their mother put into it, they will regret it so much." Sunja wanted to do her best to take care of the children in the little time she had left. Seeing her youngest daughter arguing with her second sister, the mother scolded them for the first time, hoping they would learn to behave. If mom dies, you must get along well with each other. And Haisu, as the eldest sister, should act like an older sister. Hyami, why are you always picking fights with your thoughtless younger sister? Just as the family was busy, Hyerin's boyfriend suddenly came to visit. Junwo's arrival surprised Hyerin greatly, because Sunja had always refused to accept this divorced man. But to everyone's surprise, Sunja actually asked Junwo to sit down and help with the work. Her unusual behavior made everyone feel very strange. Watching the children laugh and play together, Sunja couldn't help but turn away and shed tears. Haisu couldn't understand why they had to make so much kimchi in the middle of summer. Everyone had already worked all day and was exhausted, yet they still had to help with this. If she really felt bored being alone, she should find something else to do and stop being so obsessed with making kimchi. As the eldest daughter, saying such things made her mother furious, and she was immediately kicked out. When the thick-skinned Miho brought the kimchi back, Haisu was still angry and complaining. She felt ashamed that her newlywed second son-in-law had to do such work. But Miho thought Haisu was just being unreasonable. No matter the reason, it was normal for the mother to call us back. Under Sunja's persuasion, Hyami gradually changed her attitude toward Insuk. She also mentioned that Sunja had instructed her to get along well with Insuk. Being understood by Sunja made Insuk deeply grateful. Taemin also urged his mother to visit her mother-in-law when she had time. After all, It was she who had raised Hyami with so much effort. Junwoo also brought back 2 buckets of kimchi. He told Hyerin that her novel had been published. He finally mustered the courage to put the necklace he had bought a long time ago around Hyerin's neck. At that moment, Sunja was alone in the dark, crying uncontrollably. In the morning, Sunja took out all her clothes. She wanted to settle her affairs before she died, but Hyerin snatched away her favorite piece of clothing. Sunja then went to find Junwoo. She wanted to confirm whether he could really marry Hyerin. Junwoo doesn't understand what Sunja means, and even less why she's changed her attitude toward him so quickly. After leaving Junwoo, Sunja brings 2 more buckets of kimchi to her eldest daughter, but just as she's about to leave, she runs into Haisu. Sunja knows it's her daughter's work time and that she must have quit her job to be home. She angrily scolds her daughter, asking if she wants to end up like her, being dragged down by her husband and children for the rest of her life. She had sent her to university for 4 years precisely to prevent her from leading the life of a housewife. But Haisu felt that even after going to university, what good had it done? In the end, she had children and no one to help take care of them. Sunja had no idea when her children would ever grow up and understand. She angrily left her daughter's home. That day, Sunja, who was ill, was lying on the ground struggling to breathe. Just at that critical moment, her eldest daughter called. Hearing the phone ring, she mustered all her strength to crawl over. But before she could speak, her eldest daughter scolded her for taking so long to answer the phone. Was she still angry about quitting her job? After all these years, couldn't her mother see how difficult things were for her? Who would willingly quit their job unless they had no other choice? After hanging up the phone, Sunja couldn't help but burst into tears. She had worked so hard to help them, yet they couldn't understand her situation and let her leave in peace. It turned out that Haisu had quit her job thinking she could take good care of her children at home. Unexpectedly, her mother-in-law asked her to help with the housework and take her out. In order to save money, Haisu couldn't even bring herself to use the air conditioner. When she learned that the children in kindergarten were all learning English, Haisu felt that she was letting her daughter down. So she decided to work part-time at a supermarket so that she could earn some money without missing picking up her children. But on her first day at work, Haisu couldn't understand anything. How could someone who had worked at a bank for 10 years find even the simplest supermarket checkout so difficult? She felt ashamed just thinking about it. Just as she picked up her child and returned home, her father-in-law called again. It turned out that her mother-in-law had accidentally slipped and fallen in the bathroom and broken her arm. But when she came home from the hospital, she didn't see her daughter-in-law and was very upset. Haisu's husband was also very angry that she had ignored his mother like that. He had no idea his wife was working at the supermarket. Haisu felt deeply wronged by her husband's accusations. "I had to pick up the kids, didn't you see? I didn't even have time to change clothes?" Upon learning the truth, Miho was both angry and heartbroken for his wife. Seeing her being mistreated at the supermarket, he felt utterly useless. "If she's working so hard, what right do I have to just loaf around all day?" Miho resolved to change his bad habits, to meet his performance targets as soon as possible. He even felt that eating was a waste of time. Haisu could only sit on the ground and eat a few bites. In-suk, with tears in her eyes, told her that Sunja had lung cancer. She wouldn't live more than 3 months and urged her to go home immediately to take care of her mother. Haisu couldn't believe her ears. Just moments ago, she had argued fiercely with her. She rushed home frantically, but her mother was already lying on the ground, unconscious. Haisu hated herself for not noticing that her mother's voice sounded wrong. How could she not have thought that something dangerous had happened to her? All the doctor could do was try his best to ease the old woman's pain. Haisu had never thought that her mother would leave her. She couldn't imagine how she would live without her mother. She also didn't know how she, as the eldest daughter, would support the family in the future. Her mother's last words were that she hoped she would cheer up and grow up quickly. "After your mother leaves, you will be the pillar of support for your younger sister. Hyami is just pregnant now, so she must take care of her health. The most important thing is to make arrangements before you leave so that Hyerin can get married as soon as possible. And under no circumstances should you tell them about your illness. As the eldest sister, you must take responsibility for the family in your mother's place." Haisu felt that someone as weak as her couldn't possibly replace her mother. Feeling helpless, Haisu could only call her husband. She felt she wasn't worthy to be her mother's daughter. Just a few days ago, She had argued with her mother over pickling kimchi. Now she finally understands why her mother had pickled 100 kimchi in the middle of summer. Miho couldn't accept this reality either. All he could do now was take care of the children and make sure Haisu took good care of his mother-in-law at the hospital. Looking at her mother's haggard face, Haisu regretted not having taken better care of her all these years. She had only ever focused on her own children and never understood how hard her mother had worked. The next day, Haisu returned home to help her mother fetch her change of clothes. Seeing the empty wardrobe, she felt a pang of sadness. She then took the clothes her mother had neatly folded and hung them back up. Seeing her mother's underwear with holes in them, Haisu couldn't help but burst into tears. Hyerin was happily picking out furniture for her wedding with her boyfriend. Junwoo decided to take advantage of cleaning the house to help his mother-in-law replace the doors and windows. This would also make the house warmer in winter. Hyerin was deeply moved by her boyfriend's thoughtfulness. She had never considered her mother's needs so much, but Junwoo couldn't understand why his mother-in-law had suddenly agreed to their marriage. Hyerin said it was because she wanted to get rid of her as soon as possible so she could be free. The naive Hyerin even sometimes doubted whether she was her mother's biological daughter. Hyerin's immaturity left Junwoo feeling utterly helpless. When she returned home that evening, Hyerin saw that the lights were off and complained that her mother had no heart. Little did she know that her mother was being tortured by the side effects of the medication. After finally calming down, the first thing she asked was how Hyerin's wedding preparations were going and how Hyami was feeling. Taemin learned about his mother-in-law's illness from his father. In-suk urged him not to tell Hyami about it, but Taemin felt that if he didn't tell Hyami now, she might regret it for the rest of her life. He couldn't let his wife have any regrets in her heart. He then went to his wife's office. Hyerin also learned from the housekeeper that her mother had been hospitalized. The two daughters rushed to the hospital as fast as they could. At that moment, the irresponsible Haisu finally took on the responsibility of the eldest sister. She knew that her two younger sisters were just as unable to accept the fact that their mother was sick as she was. But now wasn't the time to cry. If their mother saw them so upset, she would be even more heartbroken. When the three sisters composed themselves and stood before their mother couldn't help but shed tears. Hyerin cried as she threw herself into her mother's arms. Hyami also couldn't control her emotions. The three women clung tightly to one another. At that moment, Taemin also approached his mother-in-law. Sunja gripped her son-in-law's hand tightly but couldn't utter a word. Taemin understood that his mother-in-law was entrusting Hyami entirely to him. He must never let Hyami suffer even the slightest injustice. What made Hyami feel the most heartbroken was that when her mother first saw her, she had apologized for turning off her phone while in the hospital and not being able to answer her calls. But during that time, Hyami hadn't even made a single call to her mother. This made Hyami feel even more guilty. Taemin didn't know how to comfort her, so he simply let her lean on his broad shoulders. Hyami knew she should have been abandoned at an orphanage. Instead, she was raised by a kind mother. She couldn't just go back to rest because she was pregnant. She felt she should sacrifice more than Haisu and Hyerin. Hyerin also told her boyfriend about her mother's illness. She felt she couldn't get married at this time. However, Junwoo's thoughts were completely opposite to Hyerin's. He believed that the sooner they married, the sooner his mother-in-law would be at ease. But Hyerin didn't understand her boyfriend's intentions. Instead, she childishly declared that if her mother didn't recover, she would never marry. Junwoo understood Hyerin's feelings. In truth, even when our parents are healthy and with us, they are already growing distant from us day by day, yet we remain indifferent, only crying and causing a scene when they lie on their deathbeds. No matter when, parents will eventually leave us. So Junwoo's intention is to get married before his mother passes away, so she can rest in peace sooner. Because Junwoo has experienced the same thing, he doesn't want Hyerin to regret it like he did. With her boyfriend's comfort, Hyerin's heart matures instantly. However, Hyami makes a shocking decision at that moment. She wants to bring her mother home and stop the treatment. Hyerin flew into a rage upon hearing this. You're not even mom's biological daughter. What right do you have to make such a decision? Haiso slapped her sister across the face upon hearing her words. Hyerin couldn't understand why her sister hit her. It was Hyami who told mom to give up treatment. It turned out that just moments ago, Hyami had witnessed her mother's adverse reaction during chemotherapy. Her mother was lying on the ground, moaning and begging her daughter to let her give up treatment. Seeing her mother suffer like this, Hyami's heart was torn apart. Hyami wanted to know if there was a better way to ease her mother's pain. But now that the tumor had spread to multiple organs, cancer treatment was only a way to give the family some comfort. Hyami knew that no matter what they did, They couldn't save her mother's life. If that was the case, why put her mother through such suffering? Haisu understood Hayami's feelings and hoped she wouldn't take Hyarin's words to heart. Among the three sisters, Hayami brought the most joy to their mother. The pride and fulfillment their mother felt came from Hayami. Therefore, Haisu was deeply grateful to this younger sister and hoped everyone could come together to support their mother. However, the next day, the mother-daughter relationship between Hayami and Insuk was suddenly exposed online. A group of journalists swarmed around Hayami like madmen. At that moment, Hayami suddenly felt a sharp pain in her abdomen and collapsed to the ground. President Min planned to kick Hayami out of the company after she gave birth. But to his surprise, Hayami's biological mother overheard this. To protect her daughter and ensure Taemin's position in the company, In-suk hatched a plan to have Taemin stage a coup. Due to the family-run management style in recent years, the company's stock prices had been plummeting. Taemin also understood that if things continued like this, the group would soon face bankruptcy. President Min believed that his son must have been blinded by those two women. But Taemin was not coveting the position of president. He just didn't want to destroy his family for the sake of profit. President Min knew that this was all In-suk's plot. But with Taemin sitting in the president's chair, there would be no place for Sora. So she found a reporter and exposed the relationship between In-suk and Hayami. She aims to expel them from the company. Upon hearing this explosive news, President Min nearly choked on his own blood. Just then, Sunja arrived with a vengeance to confront President Min. She had already learned of President Min's intentions from In-suk. If Hayami is In-suk's daughter, you can expel her immediately. From now on, the child in her womb must sever all ties with this old man. You won't see this grandson even on your deathbed. Anyway, everyone knows Sunja doesn't have much time left. Sunja's words nearly scared President Min to death. Fortunately, Hayami was unharmed. This relieved the entire family. But Haisu truly admired her mother. Even in her sickly state, hearing about her child's suffering made her as energetic as ever. Perhaps this is the greatness of maternal love. Although Hayami isn't her biological child, she was the child Sunja gave birth to with all her heart. And that's why she loves Hayami even more. Seeing everything Sunja has done for Hayami, In-suk finally understands what it means to protect a daughter as a mother. She knows she added more burdens to Sunja's already difficult situation back then. In-suk feels deeply guilty towards Sunja, but the happiness Hayami has brought to Sunja is something no one else can understand, though she secretly resents In-suk for never visiting her child. When In-suk finally shows up, she fears she might take Hayami away, leaving her to live in constant worry for the rest of her life. Now, Sunja's greatest wish is to live a few more months, so she can see her unborn grandson. Haisu, who is set to take over the family business, learns that Hyarin left her mother alone for an entire night and is furious. When the three sisters arrived at the hospital room, their mother was sitting there silently, refusing to speak. Seeing tears in her mother's eyes, Haisu seemed to understand her thoughts. In fact, when Hayami suggested stopping treatment for their mother last time, Haisa had also considered it. Everyone knew the pain one had to endure during chemotherapy. Even though they knew the disease was incurable, they insisted on continuing treatment for their mother. Doing so was merely to alleviate their own sense of guilt. When Sunja stepped through the door, she felt a lot better. She even told her eldest daughter to hurry up and cook dinner. The three sisters were just like they used to be. Haisu was making stir-fried noodles while letting her younger sisters taste it. The two younger sisters continued to complain about their older sister's cooking skills. They started arguing back and forth. Hyarin, who had been hit, rushed to tell their mother. Sunja perked up and began to mediate between the children. The next day, the mother took Hyarin to the cheapest hotel she could find, but Hyarin really didn't want to hold her wedding in such a place. What was even harder to accept was that her mother had chosen a wedding dress that was popular when she was young, although she hadn't had the chance to wear it back then. Seeing her daughter wear it now made her mother incredibly happy. Hyarin was angry that Haisu had been able to find a better hotel when she got married, and why she had to be so stingy when it was her turn. Her mother said that she had learned her lesson and didn't want to waste money on a wedding. Wouldn't it be better to save the money for the future? Although her daughter was reluctant, she finally agreed to have a simple wedding according to her mother's wishes. Mid-Autumn Festival was approaching, and Suki decided to let her daughter-in-law go home to spend the holiday with Sunja. She had already bought movie tickets to go see a movie with her father-in-law. It was the first time her mother-in-law had said something like that in all the years since they got married. Haisu was so moved that she almost cried. Even her father-in-law was shocked. Since Sunja fell ill, Suki had thought a lot. Why did she always keep her daughter-in-law by her side? she had a mother too. Suki's husband was overjoyed by her change of heart. The children also accompanied their mother to the seaside bathhouse, watching the children play happily. A rare smile appeared on the mother's face. Sunja heard that her son-in-law and daughter wanted to live with her after their marriage. Though she was happy inside, she still felt it was inappropriate. If she were the one who fell ill, she wouldn't want her newlywed children to have to take care of her. She didn't want to burden them. But Junwoo lied, saying he was doing it entirely for her. After marrying Hyerin, he might not even be able to eat. Of course, Sunja knew exactly what her son-in-law was thinking. At the same time, she was also happy to have such a handsome son-in-law living with her in her old age. Junwoo's uncle was deeply moved by his thoughts. Haisu was also very grateful to Junwoo for making such a decision. Meanwhile, In-suk heard that Hyerin had already set the wedding date and helped her sister-in-law prepare a set of the latest Korean traditional clothing for Hyami to give to her mother. But Sunja was curious how In-suk knew her size. Besides, if she wanted to send clothes, why didn't she come herself instead of making her pregnant daughter do it? On the eve of Hyerin's wedding, her mother gave her daughter the money she had saved for 10 years. She also told her daughter not to give up her career even after marriage. A woman must be capable to stand on equal footing with a man and have a voice. Although Hyerin had always longed to get married, when the day finally came, she couldn't bear to part with her mother. That night, Hyerin slept with her mother just like when she was a child. After her daughter fell asleep, Sunja called In-suk. She asked In-suk to also wear traditional Korean attire and attend Hyerin's wedding as family. In-suk couldn't believe that someone as sinful as herself would have the chance to attend Hyerin's wedding. She was also deeply grateful that her sister-in-law had invited her. However, Sunja had one more favor to ask of In-suk. That was to take care of her daughter after she passed away. Hyami had her biological mother by her side, so she didn't need to worry about her. Haisu and Hyerin were about to lose their mother. And after that, they wouldn't even have anyone to confide in if they encountered any difficulties. After hanging up the phone, the two mothers were crying uncontrollably. The next day, Sunja dressed up beautifully to hold a wedding for her youngest daughter. When In-suk arrived, Sunja took her hand and introduced her to the rest of the family. Seeing that the relationship between the two mothers had improved, Hyami was so moved that she shed tears. The younger daughter's happy marriage also fulfilled her mother's heart's desire. After the ceremony, everyone sang and danced to the music. Sunja was as happy as a child. After the wedding, she began to cough incessantly. Now that she had done everything she needed to do, the only thing she regretted was that she might not live to see Hyami give birth. So Sunja entrusted Haisu with the task of taking care of Hyami. Hyerin felt uneasy inside. Junwoo noticed Hyerin's feelings and sent her back to her mother-in-law's house. Sunja felt deeply guilty toward her son-in-law for her daughter running back to her parents' home on her wedding night. But Hyerin simply couldn't bear to leave her mother, with the children playing wildly around them. The mother wished time could stop right there. When Haisu woke up the next morning, she found her mother lying there motionless. Even in her final moments, the mother did not want her daughter to suffer with her. The mother, who had spent her entire life thinking only of her children, closed her eyes forever to allow their mother to go to heaven and reunite with their father. The three sisters decided to dress their mother up as beautifully as a Korean beauty queen. The eldest daughter applied her mother's favorite lipstick. The second daughter painted the hard-working hands with the most beautiful nail polish. The youngest daughter silently prayed that in the next life, her mother's feet would never have to work so hard. At her mother's funeral, the three sisters had already agreed not to cry, so their mother could leave with peace of mind. Haisu took care of her two younger sisters in the same way her mother had. She also instructed them to be polite and hospitable to the guests who came to pay their respects. To avoid being seen crying, the three sisters each hid in secluded places, crying until their eyes were red. When their mother finally passed away, the children could no longer control their emotions, because they would never see the mother who had worked so hard for them all their lives. In the end, the children fulfilled their mother's wish and laid her to rest by the picturesque river, because the quiet place by the river was where she had always felt most at peace. A year later, Jae-hyuk ran his sister's small shop successfully. The three sisters would return to their mother's room whenever they had time to gather together. Every season, they would help their mother organize the clothes she needed to change. The clothes Hyami had bought for her, she had always been too precious to wear. Even the cosmetics were still sealed and preserved there. The three of them would often argue fiercely over who got to wear their mother's clothes. In the end, they couldn't help but burst into laughter. With the help of her father-in-law and mother-in-law, Haisu returned to work. After retiring, In-suk helped Hyami take care of her children. President Min finally felt comfortable handing over the company to Taemin. Seeing his adorable grandson, he couldn't bear to let him go. Hyeon's new book continued to receive praise from her fans. Taejin and his wife no longer quarreled. Miho changed his bad habits and often helped his wife with housework and taking care of their daughter. The three sisters always end up meeting at their mother's house without planning it. They say God is everywhere, so he created mothers. In our eyes, mothers can do anything, but it's only when we become mothers ourselves that we truly understand the hardships they go through. The word mother always touches everyone's heart. In our hearts, the image of a mother is always so great. Finally, may all mothers around the world be healthy and happy.